In today's video, we're taking you on a journey through time, exploring the fascinating evolution of space food, from the 20th century to today. So buckle up, let's dive right into it. It all started in 1957, when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite. Just a few years later, on April 12, 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. He orbited the Earth once, in a 108-minute mission aboard the Vostok 1 spacecraft. And during that short but historic flight, he also became the first person to eat in space. Gagarin's meals were far from gourmet, just 2 servings of meat purger and 1 of chocolate sauce, all packed into metal tubes that looked like toothpaste. He's said to have eaten his first serving about 30 minutes into the mission. That single bite marked humanity's first meal beyond Earth. 23 days later, American astronaut Alan Shepard took off in the Freedom 7. His flight lasted only 15 minutes and didn't reach orbit, so no food was consumed. The title of first American to eat in space would go to someone else. That someone was John Glenn. On February 20, 1962, he launched aboard Friendship 7 and became the first American to orbit the Earth, circling it 3 times in a nearly 5-hour mission. NASA had prepared special food just for the occasion, nutrient-rich purges squeezed into tubes that Glenn had to suck through a nozzle. The texture, pretty similar to baby food. The flavor, mostly banana. Because Glenn had to keep his helmet on the whole time, the tube had an extra attachment so he could safely eat through it. In addition to the paste, NASA provided compact food cubes made of cereals and dried fruits. Each cube was coated with an edible film to prevent crumbs from floating around, a serious hazard in zero gravity. As missions got longer during the Gemini program, NASA started to think bigger when it came to food. Astronauts now had access to rehydrated vegetables, shrimp, chicken, and fruits like pears and strawberries. They even got drinks like pineapple juice, orange juice, mushroom soup, and chicken broth. There was even a small trial with cocktail-style beverages. One of the biggest breakthroughs during this time was the introduction of freeze-dried food. The process involved freezing the food at 40 degrees Fahrenheit in a vacuum, then gradually warming it to let the water inside sublimate, turning straight from ice to vapor. This method removed almost all moisture, dramatically extended shelf life, and made the food much lighter and easier to carry. Once in space, all the astronauts had to do was add hot water and the food would return to its original shape, taste, and texture. Freeze-dried meals weren't just efficient, they were a lifeline for long missions. And while they weren't 5-star dining, they were a major step up from the mush in a tube. But not every food story in space was part of the official plan. During one Gemini mission, an astronaut smuggled a corned beef sandwich from a deli called Wolfie's. He took it into orbit as a prank, but when crumbs started floating around the capsule, it became a serious concern. NASA wasn't amused. The stunt caused enough of a stir that the agency issued a public apology and promised tighter safety checks in the future. From meat paste in tubes to freeze-dried meals and secret sandwiches, the evolution of space food has been anything but boring. And as we look ahead to future missions to the Moon and Mars, one thing's for sure, space dining is only going to get more advanced, and maybe even more delicious. So, next time you open a snack, just remember, eating in space started with a tube of meat and a whole lot of courage.
The Apollo program was the first mission that successfully sent humans to the moon. From Earth to the moon, that was no doubt one of the biggest leaps in human history. And just like the technology that made it possible, space food evolved too. By the time Apollo missions were underway, the spacecraft had something earlier missions lacked: access to hot water. That one improvement alone made a huge difference in the quality of meals. For the first time, astronauts weren't just squeezing mush from tubes, they could prepare hot meals in space. Apollo astronauts were also the first to use actual utensils in space. The process was surprisingly familiar. Take a vacuum-sealed pouch of dehydrated food, inject hot water, Wait a few minutes, tear it open, and eat it with a spoon. The menu had expanded too. In fact, during the iconic Apollo 8 mission, the one that orbited the moon on Christmas Eve in 1968, the crew even enjoyed fruitcake in space. After the Apollo era wrapped up, NASA launched its first space station program, Skylab, which operated from 1973 to 1979. Skylab hosted 3 different crews, a total of 9 astronauts. Even the shortest mission lasted 28 days, a long stay by early space standards. But despite its achievements, Skylab remained in orbit for only about 6 years. In 1979, it broke apart and most of its debris crashed into the Indian Ocean and parts of Western Australia. Still, Skylab was something special. It was a one-module station, yet it stood out in terms of comfort and habitability. Aside from China's Tiangong, it was arguably the most livable space station ever built, and certainly more spacious than today's cramped International Space Station. What made Skylab extraordinary was its space, literally. It was large enough to hold a refrigerator. That meant, for the first time, astronauts had access to frozen meals and even ice cream in space. And when it came time to eat, everyone sat together around a real table. Each astronaut had their own oversized food tray, complete with multiple slots to hold meal containers in place. 3 of these slots even had built-in heaters, each controlled by a separate switch. That way, you could take a frozen meal straight from the fridge, pop it into the heated slot, and enjoy something warm, a luxury no freeze-dried meal could match. This kind of advanced dining setup was unique to Skylab. Later space missions went back to basics. Plastic trays with Velcro straps that could be fastened to an astronaut's legs, which, in zero gravity, became their table. Some trays had small magnets to hold down metal utensils, but it was a far cry from Skylab's cozy kitchen. Skylab's roomy interior also allowed astronauts to exercise in ways not possible on later space stations. With more space to move around, staying healthy in orbit got a little easier. Another development during this era was the introduction of irradiated food. This type of food was exposed to ionizing radiation to kill bacteria and extend shelf life without drastically changing its texture. While the method worked well, the idea of eating radiation-treated food understandably made a lot of people uncomfortable, no matter how many safety assurances were given. The Soviet Union's Mir space station and the International Space Station, a joint project led by the US and Russia with participation from 16 countries, became the new frontiers for humanity's journey into deep space. But ironically, as more nations joined the effort, the quality of space food actually took a step back compared to the days of Skylab. Why? Because with more experiments and international collaboration, precious space and resources inside the station had to be dedicated to scientific research. That meant less room for luxuries, including dining. Sure, the ISS introduced some new appliances, like microwave-style ovens, but the overall dining conditions became tighter and more constrained. The focus of life in space also shifted towards sustainability, especially when it came to water. Water isn't just for drinking. In space, it's used for everything: rehydrating meals, heating food, mixing powdered drinks. It's the cornerstone of every meal. On Earth, the average person uses about 350 liters of water per day. That's completely unthinkable in space. On the ISS, water is a limited and valuable resource, delivered in sealed bags through resupply missions and immediately pumped into the station's real-time recycling system. And yes, for those of you wondering, they absolutely recycle urine. Not just pee, but sweat, used wash water. Basically any moisture the body releases. Sounds gross. Maybe, but it's also a technological marvel and a survival necessity when you're hundreds of miles from Earth. Despite the 21st century's high-tech advances, certain foods are still banned in space. Crumbly items like bread and cookies are a no-go because loose crumbs can float into equipment or an astronaut's eyes or lungs. But clever substitutions have been made. For example, tortillas are used instead of bread, and soft waffles replace crunchy cookies. Even seasonings like salt and pepper need to be reimagined. Traditional granules won't work in zero gravity, so they're applied in liquid form. Need more salt? You spread a bit of salt water on your food. Want pepper? You brush on a special pepper solution. NASA takes this stuff seriously. In fact, the US has incredibly strict standards, even for the packaging. Take M&Ms, for example. You'd think they're perfect for space, long shelf life, no prep needed, but nope. NASA removes them from their original packaging and repackages them from scratch. Why? Because every single material brought into the spacecraft must meet strict safety and durability standards, down to the ink used on the wrappers. Meanwhile, the Russian approach, way more relaxed. Their cosmonauts often bring store-bought canned goods straight onto the spacecraft. And yes, there have even been stories of Russian astronauts sneaking alcohol into space. It's a bit wild, but it's part of what gives the Russian space program its colorful reputation. Now, after talking so much about American and Russian missions, it's only fitting we end with China's very own Tiangong space station. Unlike the ISS, which took nearly 2 decades of international negotiation and patchwork construction, Tiangong was built with one unified, streamlined design, planned and executed from the top down. That standardization means better space efficiency and smoother operations. And now, Tiangong is nearly fully assembled and getting ready for full-scale use. It's an exciting time. As the old saying goes, there will be a time to ride the winds and break the waves. The future of Chinese space exploration is just beginning. Tiangong, we're watching and cheering. Let's go, China. Go, go, go.